Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to make my annual erroneous predictions for the NFL upcoming season. 2014, we got a lot of interesting storylines. I know this one is a little bit later than my normal season prediction videos, but that's because I've had to retool and reformat my evaluation so many times. I think before the preseason began, my inclination was, I think the 49ers are going to win it all. This team has made it to the NFC Championship 3 years in a row, and if you kind of looked at the irony there, it's Super Bowl 49. Obviously, with a team as good as the Niners have been, and it being Super Bowl 49, you kind of think, the sense of humor that the universe has, that they would end up being the Super Bowl champions of that year. But watching these guys play in the preseason and all the off-season developments and their players getting hurt, I don't think the Niners are going to even make the playoffs this year. And a lot of other teams I kind of thought would suck. I had to kind of go back and reevaluate myself because I think they're actually looking playoff worthy. And I guess my ultimate prediction isn't that unpredictable, but you never know. Surprises do in fact happen. Okay, prediction number one. Looking at the NFC first. I'm going to go with a controversial pick and say the Seattle Seahawks are going to absolutely dominate the NFC West this year. I think they're going to end up with the absolute best record in all of football. They're going to go 14-2. I think they end up dropping one against San Francisco, and there's probably going to be a trap game late down in the season. Needless to say, they're going to be just as good as they were last year, if not better. Rounding out the NFC West, I think Arizona, it's a really good team. They're not going to be as good as they were last year. They break even. 49ers, a really, really drastic decline in the quality of their play, going to 7-9. And with their quarterback situation, I don't think there's going to be a Trent Green, Kurt Warner situation down there in St. Louis. And they break about 4-12 and not even think about making the playoffs. New Orleans, I think they win the NFC South easily and end up with a first round bye for the playoffs. Excuse me. And they go 13-3. A solid offense, great defense. Obviously, you have the new receiver rules going on, which makes it a whole lot easier for cornerbacks and safeties to get after receivers. So I think that's really going to benefit this team, which is very pass happy. I think they go 13-3. Rounding out the division, Atlanta breaks even. I think Tampa Bay, they're predicted to be pretty good this year, but I just don't see them doing much. I think they go 7-9. And I think Carolina, they go from champs to basement dwellers this year. They dropped to 5-11. Just don't like the look of their O-line. I think their defense is not going to be as good as they were last year. And it's got a feeling something's going to happen to Cam Newton. He's going to get hurt, and things are going to unravel from there. Looking at the NFC East, I really wanted this to be a little bit more competitive, but I think Philadelphia just absolutely takes it. You got Mark Sanchez down there. I think he's going to actually be sort of in a career rebirth of sorts down there with that offense. If they play as fast as they did at the beginning of last year, I think they're going to be pretty much unstoppable. I got them going 12-4. Really not much going on in the rest of the division. I think Washington and the Giants tie for second with 6-10. And I think down there in Dallas, things are not looking good at all. I got a suspicion something's going to happen to Tony Romo, and they're going to suck even more than they normally do. So, if you're deep in the heart of Texas, sorry, it's going to be a bad year. NFC North, the funny thing is, before the preseason, I kind of thought the NFC West would be the best division in football. I thought there'd be 3 teams from that division making the playoffs. But now, with the whole offensive rules kind of back in place and all the penalty calls going on and all these things kind of benefiting the pass game, you look at the NFC North, this is nothing but gunslingers, with the exception of Minnesota, who don't make the playoffs at all. You got Aaron Rodgers, you got Jay Cutler, you got Matthew Stafford, you got Megatron, you've got all those players up in Chicago and Green Bay. They're going to do really well this year. I think ultimately it's going to come down the last week of this season. It's going to be a real scrum, but ultimately I do think that Green Bay, Chicago, and Detroit all make the playoffs. Thanks definitely in part to having pretty beneficial rule changes heading into the season. So that's the NFC. Nothing really too surprising. Don't really think there's going to be any huge surprise teams making the playoffs, but, like I said, you never know. Over in the AFC, I think Denver, obviously, you look at what Peyton Manning did last year before the major offensive rule changes. If he threw, all his touchdown passes last year, he's going to be throwing like 80 or 90 this year. I think Denver, they rebound from that crushing Super Bowl loss. They're not going to be as dominant as they were last year, I think. They're still going to run away with the AFC West without question. As far as the rest of the AFC West, I know you're looking at this and thinking I'm on crack. San Diego and Kansas City both made the playoffs last year. The Raiders did not. Obviously, with the offensive scheme taken into consideration, you would say San Diego and Kansas City are going to be much improved teams. But I think that the situation in Oakland right now, I see one or two things happening. And I'm a Raiders fan. Full disclosure, I'm a homer. I think their quarterback is going to lead to one or two things. I think either Matt Schwab is actually going to play really shockingly well this season, kind of going a career rebound. Same way Mark Sanchez, I predict, will do in Philadelphia. Or I think he'll get benched and Derek Carr will come in and he'll absolutely dominate. And all these great receivers the Raiders have had for years, like Rod Streeter and Jerron Kreiner, actually have somebody who can hit them and do it accurately. And I think they shock the world and make a really, really strong push for the playoffs before finally getting eliminated in a heartbreaker in the final game of the season. But beyond that, nothing too crazy. Down in the AFC South, I think Indianapolis wins this one, but barely. I think the problem is, you look at Andrew Luck, he is a fantastic quarterback, and they have a very, very solid team down there offensively. Defense needs a whole lot of work, but still. But I think they're definitely the best team in the division, and they're going to walk away from this one pretty handily. Though I do think the Houston Texans, with that revamped defense now, with Jadavin Clowney and some new additions, are going to really resurge in a big way. They're going to go from worst to almost first. And I guess probably my big, huge, surprise, shocking pick of the season, I think the Texans not only rebound, but they do make the playoffs this year. I know, controversial. Another controversial thing I think is Jacksonville will not be as bad as they were last year. They're not going to make the playoffs, but I think they will be improved under Blake Bortles. I think they go 6-10, and I think the Titans are going to be the new bottom feeders in the AFC South. I think they go 3-13. That's really a franchise that's about to fall into a tailspin. Looking at the AFC North, or the AFC East, pardon me. All great empires have to decline at some point. The Patriots have absolutely dominated the NFL for the last 10 years. Tom Brady is a Hall of Fame quarterback without question. Year in, year out, they've been an excellently coached team, almost guaranteed playoff spots. They've missed the playoffs like once, I think, in the last 10, 11 years. And I think they do make the playoffs this year. I think they do play well. But I think this is the last season the Patriots are actually going to go out there and be a dominant team. I think bad things are going to happen. Tom Brady won't get hurt, but he's going to play not as good as he's been playing in years past, which is funny because, once again, with the rule change, you think it'd benefit them, but I don't think he has the same receiving core that he's had in years past, and I think their defense is showing some key weaknesses. That said, I think they're good enough to win the division and make the playoffs, though I do think it's going to come down to a nail-biter. I think the Jets are going to be a resurgent team. I think with the Geno Smith and Michael Vick combination, they're going to do quite well. And I think it's going to come down to the very, last second. But I think both the Patriots and the Jets get into a dogfight. Patriots win the division, but the Jets also make the playoffs. Miami, I think they can go 7-9. They're going to do pretty well, but definitely not good enough to match up with the Jets and Patriots. And I think Buffalo is the new Jacksonville. I think they dropped 2-14. The worst record overall in the league. I just see nothing but bad things happening up there. That's a franchise. The cloud of doom overhead is just almost impossible to resist speaking about. Now at the AFC North, the Bengals have won this a couple of years in a row. You got Johnny Manziel down there in Cleveland. You got Brian Hoyer, got that situation. And, even though Ohio is getting the talk of the league with all that stuff going on, I think it's actually going to be Baltimore and Pittsburgh who kind of walk away the big stories of this division. You look at Baltimore, this is a team that defensively and offensively just dominated 2 years ago in their Super Bowl run. Didn't make the playoffs last year. I think they rebound in a huge way and actually not only win the AFC North, but they also take the first seed in the AFC playoffs. I think their defense is going to be much improved. I think Joe Flacco is going to be playing way better than he did last year. He's going to look back into his form. And I think just overall, this team's got a good run game, very good passing. great defense. You got Ray Rice, who's domestic abusing all the offensive players. I think this team is going to walk away. There's going to be the huge kind of surprise. Well, not maybe huge surprise, but there's going to be a surprise team to win the division and walk away the. I'm not going to say where they're going to end up in the playoffs because later on, but they're going to do very, very, very well this year. That's my big prediction. Pittsburgh, I think, is also going to rebound. Their O-line has some problems. Their defense, they have some problems. I think they're going to be a much improved team this year, and they're going to push way, way late into December with a playoff run. But I think with the Raiders, they're going to have a similar heartbreaker collapse in the late season. Cincinnati, despite all the big talk, despite the extension of the quarterback sign, I think they go 8-8 this break even. And I think the big Johnny Football experiment, the Brian Hoyer experiment in Cleveland, is just a huge distraction. And this team is going to play very, very poorly. And the future of Johnny Football, I think, is not going to look bright at all. So with all that out of the way, now let's take a look at what I think the 2014-2015 NFL playoffs will look like. The teams making the AFC, I think it's going to be Baltimore, Denver, Indianapolis, Houston, New England, and the Jets. In the NFC, I've got Seattle, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago. All right, how about we start with the AFC first? Let's break out our big purple foreshadowing marker. Okay, we got Indianapolis 3rd seed taking on Houston, the 6th seed. Should be a very entertaining matchup. I think it's going to be very, very close. It might come down to overtime. When you have a great defense against a really good offense, you tend to go for the defense. But I think the big problem in Houston is going to be that offense. As porous as the D for Indianapolis may be, I think they have enough gas in the tank offensively to barrel them over in a very thrilling overtime victory over the Texans to get them into the second round of the playoffs. So I got Indianapolis winning that one. Patriots and Jets, they're going to be their third matchup of the year. I think this is it. This is the death knell of the Patriots franchise foreseeable future. I think Brady's going to play like crap, and they're actually going to get basically routed by the Jets in a real shocker. So you got the Jets as the 6th seed. They're going to end up playing the number 1 seed Baltimore Ravens in the second round. So that means you're going to have Denver against Indianapolis, which should be entertaining. Now we're going to take a look down at the NFC. We're going to have Philadelphia against Detroit. Detroit, they're going to be much improved with the offensive changes. They've got a really good defense. But I think Philadelphia, their offensive firepower is just way too much for them. I've got them winning. They're the 3rd seed, so that means they end up playing New Orleans in what should be an instant classic. And Green Bay and Chicago. Chicago, there's people that are taking them to win the Super Bowl. I think they're forgetting the fact that their quarterback is Jay Cutler. Aaron Rodgers is probably the most reliable overall quarterback in the league. I think the Packers go in there. They beat Chicago pretty easily. So nothing too surprising there. So that sets up Seattle against Green Bay, New Orleans against Philadelphia. I think Seattle, what more can you say? You got the defense, you've got an excellent offensive game. They can run the ball, they can pass it. I think Green Bay's going to put up a valiant effort, but the Seattle juggernaut I think is just too much to handle, and they easily punch a ticket to their 2nd consecutive NFC Championship game. New Orleans, Philadelphia, this is going to be a great game. This is going to be one of those games that's talked about for a long time to come. 2 offensive juggernauts, great defense, quarterback duel. Sanchez against Breeze. It's going to be entertaining. I think it's going to come down to the wire. There might be some fluky finish. It might take a couple of overtimes to decide it, but I think ultimately New Orleans wins an absolute dogfight against the Eagles. So that sets up Seattle and New Orleans for our big NFC Championship game. Go back to the AFC. Baltimore against the Jets. I think the Jets are going to play very, very well, but I think the Baltimore defense is enough to kind of take the wind out of the sails of Geno and boys. So I have Baltimore returning to the AFC Championship. Denver against Indianapolis. The story here is Andrew Luck is such a great quarterback. The Colts are a very, very good team, but they just don't have the other personnel to really get to the AFC Championship. I think it's another heartbreaker for the Colts, and I think it's another AFC Championship game for Mr. Peyton Manning, who I hate. Baltimore against Denver. Boy, they had a thrilling playoff game a couple of years back, didn't they? Well, I think in the 2015 AFC Championship game, it's not going to be as thrilling. I think the defense goes in there and pretty much does what Seattle's defense did to Denver in the last Super Bowl. I've got the Baltimore Ravens as your AFC champions. I know it's kind of controversial, a bit of a shocker, but I think they've got all the key elements in place. They rebound and they win the championship. Seattle, New Orleans, this is going to be the best game of the playoffs, an absolute thriller. Great defense against that great offense, but as we all know, when you have a really, really, really good offense playing a really, really, really good defense, you go with the defense. Going to be controversial, I know, but I'm going with the Seahawks to once again win the NFC Championship. So that sets up our Super Bowl 49. We got the Ravens against the Seahawks. And this is going to be really interesting because very rarely do you have two teams that are so defensively excellent taking on each other. It's usually offense against defense, and the defense just creams the offense. But this year, I think it's going to be way more competitive. We haven't had a really great low-scoring Super Bowl in a really long time. So you get down to the equation, what happens when you have a great offense, a great defense up against one another? Well, when you have two teams with a really great defense, Baltimore might be the best defense in the AFC. NFC, Seattle, definitely the best defense. You got to go with the most varied offense. And as good as the Ravens are, and they're going to be great, I assure you, I think the Seahawks just have way too many weapons, and they go in there and they defeat the Baltimore Ravens by double digits in another impressive Super Bowl performance. And at that point, that's when you start saying to yourself, guys, do we have ourselves a dynasty up there in the Pacific Northwest? You know what? It's controversial. And by controversial, I mean really not really exciting at all. Not being, going out there and risky. But I think the Seahawks become the first team to repeat as champions since the Patriots did in 04 and 05. And I think this is the team of the 2010s. The Legion of Boom will continue to dominate. Sorry, guys.